Subscribe now, because some of the most dangerous criminals don't carry weapons. They carry charm, designer suits, and a perfectly crafted lie. Like this video, comment your thoughts, and stay close, because this story proves that sometimes the most terrifying predators don't hide in the shadows. They sit across from you at dinner. The message arrived just after midnight. CC Life Gelhoy stared at her phone, half asleep in her London apartment. She had been scrolling through Tinder out of boredom, swiping past familiar faces and forgettable bios. Then she saw him, Simon Leviev. His profile looked nothing like the others. No blurry selfies. No gym mirror poses. Instead, there were photos of private jets, five-star hotels, champagne glasses held against city skylines, and tailored suits that looked straight out of a luxury magazine. In one picture, he stood beside a sleek black Rolls-Royce. In another, he was boarding a private plane with a bodyguard behind him. His bio was simple: CEO, Diamond Industry, travel often. Within minutes of matching, a message popped up. "Hi CC, how are you tonight?" His tone was confident but warm, polite but direct. They talked for hours. He told her he was the son of a powerful diamond mogul, traveling constantly between Europe and the Middle East. His life sounded like something out of a movie: luxury hotels, private security, international business deals. By morning, CC was smiling at her phone like a teenager. By afternoon, Simon had made a bold suggestion. "Let's meet today. I'm flying to Amsterdam in a few hours. Come with me." It sounded insane. They had only just met. But Simon sent proof: a photo of a private jet waiting on the runway, a selfie with his alleged bodyguard, and a boarding schedule with his name on it. Everything looked real. He even sent a voice note, his voice calm and reassuring. "Life is short, CC. Let's enjoy it." Against her better judgment, she agreed. Within hours, CC found herself standing at a private terminal in London, watching a sleek jet prepare for takeoff. When Simon stepped out of a luxury car and walked toward her, he looked exactly like his photos: tall, confident, dressed in expensive designer clothing. He greeted her with a warm smile and a quick hug, as if they'd known each other for years. Inside the jet, everything felt surreal. Champagne flowed. The seats were leather. Simon introduced her to a man he called his bodyguard and another woman he described as a colleague. Everyone treated him with respect, even deference. For CC, it felt like stepping into another world. Amsterdam passed in a blur of luxury. They stayed in a five-star hotel. Simon paid for everything: meals, shopping, transportation. He spoke about his business empire casually, as if wealth on that scale was completely normal. He showed her photos of his family, claiming his father was one of the most powerful diamond dealers in the world. He was charming, attentive, and constantly on his phone handling urgent deals. By the end of the trip, CC felt something she hadn't expected: trust. Back in London, they continued talking every day. Messages turned into phone calls. Phone calls turned into video chats. Simon sent her photos from different cities: Paris, Rome, Athens. Always surrounded by luxury. Always traveling. Then, slowly, the tone changed. One night, CC received a message that made her heart race. "I'm in danger." Attached was a photo of Simon with what appeared to be a cut on his forehead, blood visible near his eyebrow. Another image showed his bodyguard injured, lying on a hospital bed. Simon explained that enemies in the diamond industry were targeting him. He claimed his wealth made him a constant target for criminals and rival businesses. "My accounts are frozen for security reasons," he wrote. "I can't use my cards. Can you help me just for a few days?" CC hesitated, but Simon reassured her. He promised to pay her back immediately once his accounts were restored. He even sent what looked like official documents: bank statements, business letters, copies of his passport. Everything appeared legitimate. Trusting him, she agreed. She applied for credit cards and loans, transferring money to Simon to help with what he described as urgent security issues. Each time, he promised repayment was just around the corner. Each time, there was another emergency, another threat, another reason he needed help. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The amounts grew larger. Thousands became tens of thousands. Simon remained loving, attentive, always reassuring her that everything would soon return to normal. But something began to feel off. He was always traveling, always in danger, always just one step away from paying her back. Then, one afternoon, Cecily opened Instagram and saw a photo that made her stomach drop. Simon was sitting at a luxury restaurant in Greece, smiling beside another woman. The caption suggested they were on vacation together. He looked relaxed, carefree. Nothing like the man constantly claiming to be under threat. Confused and anxious, Cecily messaged him immediately. His reply came quickly. "It's business. Don't worry." But doubt had already taken root. Late one night, unable to sleep, Cecily began searching online. She typed his name into Google, expecting to see articles about his family's diamond empire. Instead, she found almost nothing. No major company listings. No credible news coverage. Only scattered social media profiles and vague references. Her heart began to pound. Determined to understand the truth, she dug deeper. She joined online forums, searching for anyone who might know him. That's when she found something that made her hands tremble. A message from another woman. "Has anyone else dated a man named Simon Leviev?" Cecily's breath caught as she clicked the thread. Inside were posts from women across Europe, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands, all describing the same man. The same photos. The same private jets. The same story about being a billionaire's son in danger. And the same desperate requests for money. Her mind reeled as she scrolled through the messages. Each story mirrored her own almost perfectly. The trips, the promises, the emergencies, the mounting debts. One post included a chilling sentence that sent a cold wave through her body. "He's not a billionaire. He's been doing this for years." Cecily stared at the screen, her hands shaking. If these women were telling the truth, then the man she trusted, the man she believed she loved, wasn't a wealthy diamond heir in danger. He was something else entirely. And as more victims began connecting the dots, they realized the truth might be far worse than any of them imagined. Because Simon Leviev wasn't just lying to one woman. He was running a global deception, and they were only beginning to understand how deep it went. But when Cecily finally confronted him with what she had discovered, his response wasn't denial. It was silence. Then suddenly he vanished. When Simon Leviev disappeared, it wasn't just from Cecily's life. It was as if he had vanished from existence. His number stopped working. His messages went unread. The man who once called her 10 times a day, who flooded her phone with voice notes and affectionate texts, had gone completely silent. Cecily sat alone in her London apartment, staring at the screen that had once connected her to a world of luxury and excitement. Now it connected her to nothing, except debt. Bills began arriving faster than she could process them. Credit card statements stacked up on her kitchen counter, like a physical reminder of the trust she had given so freely. Thousands turned into tens of thousands. Tens of thousands into amounts that felt impossible to repay. And still, there was no sign of Simon. At first, she felt embarrassed, then ashamed, then angry. But above everything else was confusion. How could someone create such a convincing life? How could a man who flew on private jets and stayed in penthouses not exist? She returned to the online forum where she had first seen the posts. More women had joined the conversation, each one with a nearly identical story. A woman in Sweden described being flown to meet Simon in another country. A woman in the Netherlands recalled expensive dinners and luxury hotels. Another in Germany explained how he had told her he was in danger and needed urgent financial help. Every detail lined up. Every message felt like a mirror. Cecily realized something terrifying. This wasn't a random scam. It wasn't a one-time deception. It was a carefully designed operation that had been repeated again and again across multiple countries. Simon wasn't improvising. He was executing a script. For days, the women compared timelines, screenshots, and financial records. Slowly, a pattern began to form. While Simon was dating one woman and receiving money from her, he was simultaneously using funds from another victim to maintain the illusion of wealth. Private jet photos weren't signs of riches. They were props. Hotel stays weren't paid from an inheritance. They were funded by the very women he claimed to love. The realization hit Cecily like a wave. Every romantic moment, every reassuring message, every promise of a future together, all of it had been part of a performance. She wasn't in a relationship. She was in a carefully staged con. Determined not to let him disappear without consequences, Cecily contacted two of the other victims. One of them, Pernilla Sjöholm, had also spent time traveling with Simon. She had stayed in luxury hotels, taken glamorous photos, and believed she was part of an extraordinary love story. Until the requests for money began. Like Cecily, Pernilla had trusted him. Like Cecily, she had believed his life was real. And like Cecily, she had been left with nothing but debt and unanswered questions. The two women spoke for hours, comparing experiences and trying to understand how someone could maintain such an elaborate lie for so long. The more they talked, the clearer it became that Simon had not just deceived them emotionally. He had manipulated them psychologically. He created urgency, fear, dependence. He made them feel special, chosen, trusted. Then he made them feel responsible for his safety. By the time the financial requests came, refusing him felt almost impossible. But there was still a question that haunted them. Where was he now? Days turned into weeks as they searched for answers. Occasionally, one of them would spot his social media activity, a photo posted in a new city, a tagged location at a luxury restaurant. He wasn't hiding. He was continuing, using a different name, a different story, a different victim. The realization sparked something inside Cecily. Fear slowly transformed into determination. If Simon was still out there, still deceiving women, then someone needed to stop him. Together, the victims began compiling evidence. Screenshots of messages, copies of bank transfers, photos he had sent from private jets and hotel suites. They documented everything, every lie, every promise, every transaction. The more they gathered, the more shocking the scale became. Simon wasn't just scamming a handful of women. He was moving across Europe like a ghost, leaving behind financial ruin wherever he went. Each victim believed she was the only one. Each believed she was helping a man she loved survive a dangerous situation. In reality, they were unknowingly funding his next performance. But gathering evidence was only the first step. They needed someone to listen. They approached authorities, hoping law enforcement would immediately recognize the seriousness of the situation. Instead, they encountered hesitation. The case spanned multiple countries. The transactions were technically voluntary. Proving criminal intent across international borders was complicated. Frustration grew. Simon was still traveling, still living in luxury, still meeting new women. Meanwhile, his victims were left struggling with massive debts and emotional trauma. One evening, as Cecily sat surrounded by paperwork and unanswered emails, she realized something crucial. If the legal system moved slowly, there was another way to expose him: the media. If they could tell their story publicly, if they could show the world what he had done, then Simon wouldn't be able to hide behind new names and new lies. His greatest weapon had always been anonymity. Without it, his entire scheme would collapse. With renewed determination, Cecily and the other victims reached out to journalists. They shared their evidence, their messages, their financial records. They told their stories in painful detail, hoping someone would understand the magnitude of what had happened. A small investigative team agreed to listen. At first, even the journalists were skeptical. A billionaire heir secretly scamming women across Europe sounded almost unbelievable. But as they reviewed the documents and compared testimonies, the truth became impossible to ignore. Simon Leviev, or whatever his real name was, had created a fictional empire so convincing that multiple intelligent, cautious women had believed it without question. And he was still doing it. The investigation began quietly. Reporters traced his movements across countries. They examined his social media activity. They spoke to additional victims who had not yet come forward publicly. Each new interview added another piece to the puzzle. The story was bigger than anyone had imagined. But just as they prepared to confront him and expose the operation, something unexpected happened. Simon resurfaced online, posting new photos, traveling with a different woman, living as if nothing had changed. It was as though he believed he was untouchable, immune to consequences. And that confidence made the journalists realize something chilling. He had no idea they were coming, because behind the scenes, evidence was building. Victims were uniting. And for the first time since he began his elaborate deception, Simon Leviev was no longer in control of the narrative. But when the investigation team finally uncovered his real identity, his real name, his criminal history, and the truth about his past, it revealed something even more disturbing. This wasn't his first time running from the law. And unless they acted quickly, it wouldn't be his last. By the time investigators uncovered Simon Leviev's real identity, the illusion of the billionaire prince began to crumble. His real name was Shimon Hayat, not the heir to a diamond empire, not the son of a powerful billionaire, just a man with a long history of deception, fraud, and carefully constructed lies. For years, he had moved across countries, changing identities the way others change clothes. Each new city offered him a fresh start, a new audience, and new victims willing to believe in the fantasy he created. Luxury hotels, private jets, designer clothing, none of it belonged to him. It was all funded by the very people he was deceiving. The more journalists and victims dug into his past, the more shocking the truth became. Shimon had previously faced fraud allegations in multiple countries. In some places, he had served time. In others, he had simply disappeared before authorities could catch up to him. He wasn't just a romantic scammer. He was a professional illusionist. The investigative team worked quickly. They gathered testimonies from victims across Europe, piecing together a timeline that showed how the scheme operated. Each relationship followed the same pattern: intense romance, lavish displays of wealth, then sudden danger and urgent financial requests. Once one victim's funds were exhausted, he moved to the next. It was a cycle designed to sustain itself. But this time, the women he had targeted refused to remain silent. Cecily, Pernilla, and others decided they would no longer hide their experiences. They spoke openly, sharing evidence and confronting the emotional toll the deception had taken on their lives. Their courage began to shift the narrative. What had once been private shame transformed into public exposure. Media outlets started paying attention. Investigative reports began circulating. Slowly, the story spread beyond private messages and closed forums into the global spotlight. And with each new headline, Shimon's carefully crafted persona became harder to maintain. Still, he continued traveling, continued posting photos, continued living as though nothing had changed. To outsiders, he appeared untouchable, a man moving freely despite mounting accusations. But behind the scenes, pressure was building. Authorities in several countries began reviewing evidence. Old cases were reopened. Financial records were examined. The network of lies that had once protected him started to tighten like a net closing in. Then came the moment that changed everything. A journalist managed to track Shimon's movements and coordinate with law enforcement. Information was shared across borders. Alerts were issued. For the first time in years, his ability to move freely began to disappear. At an airport, as he prepared to travel once again, the illusion finally collapsed. He was detained. The man who had spent years portraying himself as a powerful heir now stood facing authorities with no private jet waiting, no luxury suite reserved, and no carefully constructed identity left to hide behind. The arrest marked the beginning of a legal process that would expose the full extent of his deception. News of his capture spread quickly. For the victims, it brought a mix of emotions: relief, anger, and a strange sense of closure. The man who had manipulated their trust and emotions was no longer just a memory or a disappearing profile on a screen. He was real, and he was finally being held accountable. In court, the details of his operations emerged piece by piece. Financial records revealed the scale of the deception. Testimonies described the psychological manipulation. Evidence showed how he used one victim's funds to create the illusion of wealth for another. The pattern was undeniable. Eventually, he faced consequences for some of his actions. But even as legal proceedings unfolded, questions remained about how many victims had never come forward and how much money had truly been lost. For many, the emotional impact outweighed the financial one. Trust had been broken in a way that was difficult to repair. Relationships had been built on illusions so convincing that recognizing them as false felt almost impossible. Yet there was also resilience. Cecily and the other women refused to let the story end with their victimization. By speaking publicly, they transformed their experiences into warnings for others. Their voices reach people across continents, reminding viewers that deception does not always appear threatening. Sometimes it arrives dressed in luxury, confidence, and charm. The story became a global cautionary tale about trust in the digital age, about how carefully constructed identities can blur the line between reality and performance. It revealed how easily perception can be manipulated and how quickly illusion can become belief. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of the case wasn't the money or the luxury or even the elaborate lies. It was how convincing the fantasy had been. Even after his arrest and exposure, Shimon Hayat's story didn't simply end. Reports surfaced of him attempting to rebuild his life, re-entering social spaces, and maintaining a presence online. The persona of Simon Leviev had been dismantled, yet the man behind it continued to exist beyond the headlines. For the victims, true closure proved complicated. Justice had begun, but the emotional scars remained. The experience reshaped their understanding of trust, relationships, and the risks hidden behind carefully curated online identities. Still, they chose to speak, to share, and to ensure that others would recognize the warning signs before becoming entangled in similar deceptions. Their decision turned a personal tragedy into a public lesson. And in doing so, they reclaimed control over a narrative that had once been dominated by illusion. Today, the story of the man who pretended to be a billionaire prince remains one of the most shocking deception cases of the digital era. It serves as a reminder that not every display of wealth is real, not every promise is genuine, and not every person is who they claim to be. Some identities are carefully constructed masks. And sometimes, the most dangerous lies are the ones wrapped in the most beautiful truths. If this story left you questioning how well we truly know the people we trust, then you're already beginning to see the world the way these victims now do, with caution, awareness, and a deeper understanding of how easily perception can be manipulated. Because in a world where anyone can create a persona, the line between reality and illusion has never been thinner. And somewhere out there, another story may already be unfolding. Another carefully crafted identity waiting to be believed. If you think this case was shocking, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe now so you don't miss the stories that prove truth can be stranger and far more dangerous than fiction.